Boy, oh boy, these comments on the wide receivers by Hugh Freeze, it'll get you going.
In the world full of podcasts, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of hot takes, an Auburn sports homer, master of the boog, and message board legend. Get your buttons buttoned and your hats flattened because the Top Button Podcast is about to kick off. And you don't want to miss your courtside seat. Now, here's your host, Charlie 5.
Yes, sir. We're back. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Rush, a.k.a. Charlie 5, and we are ready to get after it. We are going to have a barn takeover. We got some great questions from thebarnauburn.com. We post the mailbag up on Wednesdays, and the guys send in their questions, but I had to address Hugh Freeze's comments on the wide receivers after practice on Tuesday. Pretty big stuff, pretty lofty expectations, pretty big comparisons. I think you're going to really like it. We're going to dive into that here in just a second. But before we do that, we have to give a shout out to Uncle Keith's Red Sauce. Go to unclekeithsredsauce.com. Use coupon code TheBarn25 to take 25% off. I love the comments. I love the tweets. I love the pictures. You're going to love one of the questions in the barn takeover as well. Uncle Keith's Red Sauce related. You got to check it out if you hadn't already. You can go online and buy it, use the coupon code to save, or if you live in the state of Alabama and you're close to a Publix, you can get it there. It's good stuff. Southern salsa with a Southern kick. Auburn family, support them, show them some love. Uncle Keith's Red Sauce. It's good, y'all. I've been talking about the wide receiver room, and it's so funny that the show that went up was the day of the first practice on Tuesday. I'm sorry. The show that went up on the first day of practice on Tuesday was about the wide receivers. And I talked about, obviously, how excited I was, thought they could be one of the best in the country, definitely one of the best in the SEC. And then Hugh, in his press conference, really pumped up the wide receiver room and really talked about how big the expectations are. I'm going to let you hear what he has to say, and then I'll tell you my thoughts.
If that room doesn't have success, we won't have success, but it is one of the more talented rooms I've ever been associated with. And, you know, somebody asked me the other day how I would rank that room versus DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Van Jefferson, Evan Ingram. I think it's a bit early for me to put all of that on them, but it rivals it. It's close, I think. You know, even like Malcolm and Perry, who just a second year in the same system with the same terminology, doing the same things, you see them now catching on. There were still times last year, you know, that, you know, Peyton's ready for Malcolm or Perry to do this, and it may not get exactly done, and now you start seeing them executing at a better level. So we are very much dependent upon that room having success.
Start right off the bat. If that room doesn't have success, we won't have success. I've been talking about how you should start to prepare yourself, because I think the offense is going to put the ball in the air a bunch. And this is a main reason why. I know that we're conditioned as Auburn fans to run the ball, have a stable of running backs, pound the ball. That's just been Auburn football for as long as we can remember. But now you have a group of kids at wide receiver that are at a level that we haven't ever seen, at least going into a season. I mean, obviously they could all bust, but I don't necessarily see that happening. We have some wide receivers that are, as a collection, I really do think, on paper and maybe even from a recruiting ranking standpoint, the best group maybe we've ever had. I've already gone through the list of guys I'm not going through it again. But you saw some highlights from practice. You've heard some other comments. Hugh said Malcolm looks like a different person. I've heard other coaches say almost the exact same thing about Perry Thompson. And those guys are like the 3 and the 4 of the group. Not even the 1 and the 2. We're not even really talking about, it's almost like it's just a given that Cam and Eric Singleton are going to be good. We know they're great. The 3 and the 4. Then you got Sam Turner in the mix. Like all these guys, man, it's crazy. I've watched Auburn football for a long time. And the collection of guys at wide receiver in this room is something that I can't really – I go back and I can't really find another group that remotely compares on the talent level. The second part of that was when he compared it to one of his best wide receiver rooms at Ole Miss. He didn't necessarily compare it. Someone asked him, where does this room rank? When you compare it to some of those Ole Miss rooms. And obviously he said he didn't want to put that pressure on them right away, but that it rivals, one of his best groups of wide receivers is just chock full of studs. That's what we expected out of Hugh Freeze when he was hired. Eventually, you were going to have some, they called them NWO. I think it was nasty wideouts or something like that. And I think we're going to have some nasty wideouts for sure. And then the last piece, just experience in the same system year over year. Who does he call out? Malcolm and Perry. 2 guys that were very close last year at times. Malcolm a little bit more so than Perry of exploding as true freshmen. But there were little things about the playbook, little things about the decision-making, little things about reading the defense that maybe they just weren't quite there yet. One more year, same terminology, same system, same play caller, same philosophy. The little decision-making items, the little reads and things like that, they're turning into completions. They're turning into, much more of weapons. They're turning into weapons, much more than liabilities. That's what's going to make them take that next big jump. Quarterbacks and wide receivers being on the same page. I'm just saying, prepare yourself this year because I think we're going to put the ball in the air a bunch. The more and more I think about it, I agree with Hugh. This team goes as far as this wide receiver room takes it. It's the best. I think it's probably defensive back and maybe wide receiver, maybe the best position groups on the team. So you got to lean on them. If you got some studs, you got to lean on them. So buckle up because I think we're going to be putting the ball in the air a bunch. And I personally love that. You know how I love 50-50 balls. You know how I love going vertical. Get ready for it because I think it's coming. Before we get into the actual barn takeover, let's give a quick shout out to mybookie.ag. Use coupon code BARN for a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. It's free money. Give them $100. They're going to give you 50 back in free money to play with. Auburn tips off in the Sweet 16 tomorrow night. I think they're still a 7.5-point favorite. Maybe I think it's actually gone back up. So definitely got to check that line, get you some action there, or any of the rest of the NCAA tournament, NBA, MLB, whatever, doesn't matter. They got it. Mybookie.ag. And then I got my rowback hoodie on today. I thought I've been telling you all about it. The throwback rowback. Let's go. The throwback Albie rowback hoodie, navy. Feels amazing. The material it feels like I'm not even wearing anything. I am. I promise you. If you're listening on audio, I promise you I am. It's fantastic, and you can save big by using coupon code BUTTON20 to take 20% off. Check them out, rowback.com. All right, let's get into the barn takeover. There's some good stuff we got to get through here. From Cambo, what is your prediction for how far this team goes with the recent play you've seen? Also, it's so excited for Friendship Friday. Friendship Friday was great. Got a bunch of great reviews last week. If you haven't been paying attention, from now on, especially during the off season, we're going to bring on a member of the barn, auburn.com, to make their podcast debut every Friday. We're going to call it Friendship Friday. So Cambo's fired up for that. But as far as his question, basketball prediction for how far this team goes. Obviously, the first game, I guess it's not the first game is the most important. Every next game is the most important. I love the matchup with Michigan State. I love the matchup with Michigan. And then I love the matchup with either Ole Miss or Michigan State. It's hard to see if this team performs like they did against Creighton. If they have that same intensity, that same fire, it's hard to see how they'll lose either of the next two games. I think they'll be favored in both. If they beat Michigan, I think they'll be favored in the next one by about the same amount, 7 or 8 points. And it's hard not to see how they don't get to the Final Four if that same team shows up. Now, again, if the team that showed up in the first game shows up, if the Alabama State game team shows up, they may get bounced this next game. They may get bounced tomorrow. But something about the way the attitudes have changed, something about the way that Dylan Cardwell has taken ownership of being the leader of this team and the things that he said has seemed to ignite the fire in a couple of guys. So I'm feeling good, man. Feels like it's Final Four or bust at this point in time. Let's go to the next one. Cray. What would you say our biggest weakness is for our basketball team going forward? Is it the lack of effort sometime? The tendency to try to force the three? What do you think? Sometimes we're our biggest weakness, I think. Just kind of what I just addressed earlier. But if it's just from the basketball standpoint, sometimes I think late in shot clock, if our first couple of plays that we call don't seem to work, or rotations aren't working, or the ball's not moving, it's just kind of sticking, we get into sort of a shot chuck mode. Tahad is getting better, but I think one thing this team really lacks, Chad's probably the only one that can really do it, and it has to be a good matchup. Somebody that can just go to the hole. Somebody that can just go to the hole, get fouled, bail us out. Our bailouts are three, like we chunk up a three, and a lot of them go in. That true, I can beat my guy off the dribble, I can get to the basket, and I'm going to finish, or I'm going to get fouled. That to me sometimes is a weakness. And then we picked up the intensity on the boards. Obviously, the last game, that's going to be key moving forward. Just being in intensity on rebounding, not allowing second chance points. That can be a big weakness at times. But a lot of that's honestly just effort and attitude. And I think they have the right mindset now. Now, just hopefully that it carries over into this first game tomorrow evening. Brian Beatty, what is the benefit of spring practice for a team anyway? He agrees with Hugh. It seems like it'd be better just to do 3 weeks in June. Under the old system's not the right word. Let's just say 10 years ago, before the portal, before NIL, really even before early enrollees became a thing. For the most part, you had your whole team minus incoming freshmen there. So you could get a good idea of that. The old saying used to be you build your team in the spring. That's where you build your chemistry. That's where you get tough. That's where you find out your position battles and you kind of start shaking out your depth chart. This was also when the season would end, on New Year's Day. You know what I mean? Now with the playoffs and things like that, the season can go all the way into close to February. It's not as relevant anymore. Back then, it made sense. You had your team locked in. Your season was pretty much over. You got just say 2.5, 3 months to rest and recover. Then you had a spring practice where you kind of built your team, figured out where people were going to go, made your notes on the team, prepared for the incoming freshmen to come in June, have a plan for them. Made sense. Celebrate it, have a spring game. But now I'm with you, Brian. I'm with Hugh. I don't think it quite makes sense anymore. Your seasons last longer. Kids leave. Kids leave in December in the portal. New kids come in. Kids leave after spring. New kids come in. Freshmen come in December. Some other freshmen come in June. Doesn't make a ton of sense. You don't really know. What do you really learn? I mean, the team's not even finished yet. And then to top it all off, you just have no time to recover anymore. It doesn't make a ton of sense to do it the old way anymore. I think I'm with as long as they do something for the fans. Really, A-Day was more about the fans than anything. And I think there's a lot of cool opportunities for fan-centric things to be able to do just to give people an excuse to come to town, hang out, celebrate Auburn, do the Auburn things, go to the Auburn places, make it a weekend. There's a lot of different things that they could do from that standpoint that could make a big impact with the fans. But as far as the way that camp goes, I'm with Hugh. When June gets here, everybody's going to be here. Your team is here. Even if it's late enrollee, I say late enrollee, normal enrollee high school guys, everybody's here. Your roster's set. So you're not practicing, you're not investing time in kids that may leave. I think it makes sense, and I totally get it why the coaches want to do what they're doing. I know it's early, but who has surprised you from spring practice so far? I mean, it's got to be Alex McPherson, man. I know that's probably talking about a kicker is probably not the sexy answer. I'm not super surprised by Perry, all the glowing remarks about Perry, because I'd heard him prior. As far as how good he looked physically, how good he looked in the workouts, in the throwing sessions, and now it's carrying over to practice. And just heard Hugh talk about it just a second ago. I would say Alex, man, being healthy, that was kind of kept quiet, and he just busts out onto the scene and makes every kick in his very first spring practice. One of his very first practices back. It's huge. Gaining weight, feeling good. That's massive, man. That's massive. These next two are more fun than anything. Super serious question. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Absolutely not. Hot dog's not a sandwich. I've been trying to it does have all of the criteria that makes up a sandwich. It's got the bread. It's got the meat. It's got the condiments, the additions. But typically, you can take one bite and work your way down a hot dog. I think a sandwich requires at least 2 bites across before you can. A sandwich requires at least 2 bites across. Then you can call it a sandwich. I know people are going to be like, what about a sub sandwich? Well, look, if you can take down a sub sandwich in one bite, we need to put you in like the carnival. That's impressive. A good sub sandwich, it should take you at least 1.5 to 2 bites to kind of work your way down it. And then if you just turn the hot dog long ways and eat it, you're just a weirdo. So I'm going to say a hot dog is in a category of its own. It's a hot dog. We'll just put it in the dog category because I've seen, you got sausage dogs, things like that. Well, there's a dog category. There's a sandwich category, and then there's a dog category. How about that? And then the last one, this is great. Your boy George, are we positive that it was Dylan and Stephen Pearl's public call-outs of the team that made them all play so well against Creighton? Or maybe, just maybe, did BP finally tap into our secret stuff? And then if you're listening, this is going to be awful, but if you're watching, this is the secret stuff he's talking about. It's the Space Jam Bugs Bunny holding the water bottle of secret stuff, but instead of the secret stuff, it's Uncle Keith's red sauce. And it's the red top too. Get them fired up with a little spicy. That's fantastic. This just goes to show you, man, when we're talking about this Uncle Keith's red sauce, everybody loves this stuff. Even to the point where we're making memes out of it. That's fantastic. Great stuff always. The Barn Takeover is one of my favorite parts of the week. Tomorrow is could be my favorite part of the week, though. We have our second episode of Friendship Friday. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait for you guys to meet another member of thebarnauburn.com. You can join thebarnauburn.com. Just go to thebarnauburn.com. And when you sign up for your annual subscription, you get $25 off for the whole year of 2025. So definitely take advantage of that. And hey, if you need a real estate agent, hit me up. I'd love to help you. Love to help your family. Message me on Twitter, message me on Instagram, or email me at crush with a K at thekeyAgency.realestate. I'd love to help you in Auburn, but if you need any help anywhere in the state of Alabama, I'm your guy. So give me a shout. Guys, I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back again tomorrow. It's another episode of the Top Button Podcast. Stay buttoned.
Thanks for listening and drive home safely.